Welcome back, and joining us on the show now is Vandana from Vanda Insights. Vandana, thank you for your time. And the kind of run-up that we've seen in the crude oil price is heading for a very, very strong gains for this week. Is a reaction to the U.S. sanctions on Russia and the European Union's 19th sanction package also on Russia. To begin with the U.S. Sanctions first, and this is directly on Rosneft and Lukoil. How are you reading this? The markets clearly have reacted. Today is a day of a bit of a pause. But how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, good afternoon, Manisha. So indeed, the reaction is almost entirely to the U.S.'s blanket sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, two major producers and exporters of Russian crude and refined products. Equally importantly, the only ones that were left, the only export channel that was left following previous sanctions against a host of other companies. So essentially, this is like almost slamming the door on more than 6 million barrels per day of Russian exports. In theory, I would add that caveat, in theory, of course, because the market has a lot of questions, how strictly it will be enforced, and how long this will last, because the situation is very, very fluid at a very political level. It's quite clear, at least to me, that Trump is hoping that Putin will come to the negotiating table. So for all you know, Manisha, things can take another about turn in a very, very short period of time, which is why you're seeing what I would call a relatively muted reaction from crude. So yes, as you pointed out, they're up. Brent WTI up 5% just in one day, but still not too far from their 5-month low. So, almost a disproportionate reaction if you were to look at, potentially 6 million barrels per day of supply being threatened.
Oh, absolutely. Vandana, what does it really mean for India now? Because while we already are reeling under that 50% tariffs, which can be brought down to 15, 16 is what we've heard in sense of negotiations. And then this comes in. I mean, this is directly at the origin now. How do you see India reacting to this, and what does it mean for India?
Yeah, so while the previous U.S. pressure on India was not absolutely black and white in terms of leaving New Delhi and the Indian refiners, a lot of scope to push back or to basically say, sorry, no, we're just going to continue importing Russian crude. I think things are quite different this time around because of the threat of secondary sanctions. And so what that means is that essentially the U.S. has said, and said so very clearly, that any entity that deals with Rosneft and Lukoil will be liable to secondary U.S. sanctions. So this is a risk that all Indian refiners cannot take because, it essentially that means that they are barred from U.S. dollar dealings and from the U.S. capital markets, which will just be a very heavy price to pay.
Vandana, also, we do understand there's a lot of conversation going in right now. And as you said, the situation is quite fluid. And most of the market participants believe that there is some balancing act that we would see come in from India and US as well. And then almost everybody seems to be believing that there would be some way that Russian oil will find its way into the global markets.
Yes, indeed, Manisha. Good points. There are layers of complexities, which may also explain why you're seeing a cautious or, as I've said, relatively muted reaction from crude. So one of them is, of course, the ongoing trade talks between U.S. and India, similarly between U.S. and China. And we know that even before this week's actions by the U.S. and EU, this has been one of the negotiation points. Trump has been asking both countries to phase down or phase out Russian imports. So there is some leeway, I would imagine. Of course, I'm not privy to exactly where things stand in those talks now, but I can imagine that there might be some negotiation room, like, maybe some exemptions being made or a longer phase down period being given. Right now, it's just 1 month. So basically, after 1 month, there can be no deliveries from Rosneft and Lukoil. So that is indeed possible. And the other one, also, as you alluded to, the whole idea is to get to Putin to the negotiating table. And I do feel, there's some differences out there amongst observers and analysts whether Putin will buckle this time. I do feel this is a major body blow to him, especially the U.S. going against Rosneft and Lukoil. So it's entirely possible that he does something to de-escalate the situation. I'm not suggesting, find a solution. I think that's going to be very tricky. But just to de-escalate the situation enough to get this pressure off his back. So that's possible as well.
What's your sense also on the prices moving forward from here? I mean, yeah, this week is something else, but when you look at the last 1 month, last 6 months, or this year for that matter, we are trading in the negative, and this perhaps could be a third straight year of negative in that sense.
Yes, I think the overall downward trend of prices this year versus last year, so it has averaged just under $70 Brent, almost $10 lower than 2024 average. And expected to continue edging lower in 2026. I think that is just a factor of, bigger influences at play, which is, global economy is it's in growth, but decelerating growth. So that's not very good for oil demand. OPEC Plus has been unwinding and pretty quickly unwinding some cuts. So there's plenty of supply and very sluggish demand growth. So in that overall narrative, I can see prices just continuing to drift lower.
Vandana, finally, would you say that this is a bigger blow for Russia than anybody else in sense of consumers of oil globally?
I would think so. Of course, it's not a good situation for China and India either. Especially for India, which has benefited from the discounted crude. And, once you've sort of built up one-third reliance for your imports, one-third of your imports are from Russia, you can rejig the supply chains, but it's just a lot of headache. Not good for China either. China has a pipeline between, getting Russian crude, almost 800,000 barrels per day. So not good for these two countries. But yes, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is... I feel that this will make Putin think harder than any of the other measures that have been taken against him previously, either by Ukraine or the Western allies.
Okay, all right. So a story which is definitely not done at this point in time. Vandana as well as Manisha, thanks very much for joining in and speaking to us and giving us all of that perspective. So Brent crude currently at around $65 per barrel. Need to take a break with the news that the Nifty is just about lower by around 48 points. Just want to point out that Kotak Mahindra Bank is one of the Nifty stocks which is losing around 2% at this point. And why exactly is that in focus is because it comes out with its numbers on Saturday. So ahead of that, that stock is weak. So Kotak Mahindra Bank down around 2%. Dr. Reddy's comes out with numbers today. So maybe we should just pull up that stock and see how that is doing, holding up with a gain of around 0.3%. We'll take a short break, but up next we'll get you more on the markets. A lot of stocks in focus. Stay tuned.